China made history this year when it became the first nation to land a spacecraft on the far side of the moon, the Chang'e 4.
Over the past decade and a half, one country has quietly sent more spacecraft to the moon than any other nation on the planet. Not a single flagship mission. Not a one-off publicity launch. We are talking about a sustained campaign. Orbiters, landers, rovers, a robot designed to leap into the darkest craters imaginable, and a spacecraft that retrieved rock samples from a region no human has ever set foot on and carried them all the way back to Earth. And that is only the surface of it. Here's what makes this story genuinely gripping. China is not pursuing this because it wants to win a sprint to plant a flag. It is pursuing this because the moon may be holding something that could fundamentally reshape how humanity explores the entire solar system. Something frozen. Something ancient. Something that has been sitting in permanent darkness for billions of years, waiting to be discovered. By the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why China keeps returning to the moon, what they are actually searching for, and why whoever cracks this problem first could end up shaping the future of space travel for generations. Let's get into it. Most nations that set their sights on the moon try to land on it as quickly as possible. China took a deliberately different path. Back in the early 2000s, Chinese space planners sat down and designed a roadmap intended to unfold over decades. This was not because they lacked the capability to move faster. It was a strategic choice. Every mission was engineered to teach them something specific they would need for the next one. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was rushed for the sake of headlines. The plan rested on 4 phases. First, orbit the moon and study it in detail. Second, land on it. Third, retrieve samples and bring them home. Each phase had to succeed completely before the next one began. It is the same logic you would use building a skyscraper. You do not install the glass before the steel frame is up, and you certainly do not start on the roof before the foundation is poured. The first mission launched in 2007, Chang'e, named after a moon goddess from Chinese mythology. The spacecraft orbited the moon for over a year and produced some of the most detailed lunar surface maps available at the time. There was no dramatic landing, no human drama, just clean, precise data that scientists and engineers could analyze for years and slowly convert into a workable plan. 3 years later, Chang'e 2 refined those maps even further. Researchers could now zoom into craters, ridges, and mountain ranges to determine exactly where a spacecraft could safely touch down without tipping over or sinking into loose soil. These missions never grabbed front-page attention the way a crude rocket launch would, but behind the scenes, they were building the blueprint that would guide everything to follow. And what followed genuinely changed what scientists thought they understood about the moon. In 2013, China made its first major leap. Chang'e 3 became the first spacecraft to perform a soft landing on the moon since the 1970s. Consider that for a moment. Nearly 4 decades had passed without a single controlled landing on the lunar surface. Then, quietly and precisely, China did it. The lander carried a small rover named In-situ, meaning Jade Rabbit. It rolled off onto the gray, dusty terrain and immediately got to work. Within days, In-situ found something unexpected in the rocks. For decades, virtually everything science knew about moon rocks came from the Apollo missions. A small group of astronauts had walked the lunar surface and returned with samples, and researchers had been studying those same specimens ever since. An entire understanding of the moon's composition had been built on that foundation. Textbooks were written, models were constructed, a complete scientific narrative was assembled. That narrative, it turned out, was incomplete. In-situ's instruments analyzed the soil and surrounding rocks and identified a type of volcanic rock that matched nothing in the Apollo collection. The chemical signature was different. The mineral arrangement was different. It was like discovering a completely unfamiliar recipe in a cookbook you assumed you had read cover to cover. Not a variation on a known dish, but something entirely new. The implications were significant. The moon is not a single uniform body. It is geologically complex, with regions that formed through different processes across different eras. There had been volcanic activity in areas no previous mission had ever examined. The regions Apollo had explored were just a small cluster of points on a vast map stretching across millions of square kilometers. The moon people thought they knew was only a fragment of the real picture, and the rest had never been studied up close at all, which raised an obvious question. If the areas already explored were still producing surprises, what might be hiding in the places no one had ever looked? The moon always shows Earth the same face. This is not coincidence. The moon rotates at exactly the rate that keeps one side perpetually facing us, while the far side points constantly away into deep space. You could observe the moon every night for your entire life and never glimpse the other side, not even with the most powerful telescope ever built. Landing on the far side was long considered nearly impossible. The instant a spacecraft touches down there, it loses all direct contact with Earth. No line of sight, no way to send commands, no way to receive data, no way to know if something has gone wrong. It would be like trying to communicate with someone sealed inside a soundproof room with no signal and no door to knock on. China solved this with remarkable elegance. Before launching the lander, they positioned a relay satellite in a carefully selected orbit beyond the moon, where it could maintain a view of both Earth and the lunar far side simultaneously. Signals could then bounce between the lander and Earth through this satellite, like a reliable messenger relaying messages between two parties who cannot see one another. Simple in concept, extraordinarily difficult to execute. In 2019, Chang'e 4 touched down inside the South Pole Aitken Basin, one of the largest impact craters in the entire solar system. It spans more than 2,500 kilometers across, roughly the size of Western Europe. Scientists believe it is so deep and so ancient that the original impact may have punched through the moon's outer crust, exposing material from deep within the lunar interior that had been buried since the moon first formed. Then in 2024, Chang'e 6 accomplished something even more astonishing. It did not merely land on the far side. It landed, collected roughly 2 kilograms of ancient rock and soil, sealed the material inside a container, launched a small rocket off the lunar surface into orbit, docked with a waiting spacecraft, transferred the cargo, and returned it all the way to Earth. Every single step had to function flawlessly, and none of them had ever been attempted from the far side before. The return samples were around 2.8 billion years old and showed clear evidence of volcanic activity occurring far later than anyone had predicted. The moon's geological story did not go quiet as early as scientists had assumed. It ran longer and stranger than the textbooks ever captured. And yet, as extraordinary as all of this was, it still was not the main objective. The real prize sits at a completely different part of the moon. Step outside on a clear night and look at the moon. Now picture its very bottom, the South Pole. On Earth, the poles are frozen and ice-covered. On the moon, the South Pole is something far stranger. Because the moon barely tilts on its axis, sunlight strikes the South Pole at an extremely low angle, skimming across the surface almost sideways. Some craters near the pole are so deep that their walls block every ray of sunlight entirely. Not for a day, not for a season, but for over 1 billion years. No light has reached their floors since long before any life existed on Earth. Inside these craters, temperatures plunge to around -200 degrees Celsius, colder than the surface of Pluto, and among the coldest natural environments anywhere in the solar system. But that extreme cold is exactly what makes these craters so exciting. Scientists believe those permanently shadowed crater floors may be storing frozen water ice. Over billions of years, comets and asteroids carrying water repeatedly struck the moon. Most of that water evaporated or drifted off into space. But in these permanently dark craters, the water had nowhere to go. It simply stayed, frozen solid, perfectly preserved, like food left in the back of a freezer no one ever opens. Now consider what water actually represents in space. Water is made of oxygen and hydrogen. Oxygen is what astronauts breathe. Hydrogen is one of the most powerful rocket fuels ever developed. If you can extract that ice, split it into its components, and convert it into breathable air and usable fuel, the moon stops being just a destination. It becomes a supply depot, a fueling hub sitting right next to Earth, capable of sending spacecraft deeper into the solar system without hauling all that heavy, expensive fuel up from Earth's surface. Launching anything off Earth costs an enormous amount because our planet's gravity is so strong. The moon's gravity is only about 1/6 of Earth's, which means launching fuel from the moon would cost a fraction of what it costs from home. Future missions to Mars, to the moons of Jupiter, or beyond could stop at the moon, refuel, and continue onward. The moon could become humanity's first off-world supply station, and whoever builds it first gains a substantial head start on everything that comes after. This is why the South Pole matters so much, and why China keeps returning, mission after mission, year after year. To actually find and confirm that water ice, you cannot simply orbit overhead and make educated guesses. You have to enter those dark craters directly. But conventional rovers run on solar power, and no sunlight means no energy. Worse, wheels struggle on the sharp, jagged, unpredictable terrain inside a crater that has sat undisturbed for 1 billion years. China's solution is Chang'e 7, currently planned for launch in 2026. It is the most technically ambitious lunar mission the country has ever designed. and it includes something never used before in lunar exploration: a small robot capable of jumping. Rather than slowly rolling across the surface, this hopping probe can leap directly into permanently shadowed craters. It carries instruments designed to detect water molecules, identify hydrogen signatures, and analyze frozen deposits embedded in the ground. It enters, performs its work, and exits places that would disable a standard rover within minutes. Picture sending a nimble frog into a dark cave instead of trying to drive a car down into it. The full Chang'e 7 mission also includes an orbiter mapping the South Pole region from above and relaying signals, a lander touching down on stable terrain near the pole, and a rover studying soil composition and scouting targets for the hopping probe. All 4 components operate as a coordinated team, continuously sharing information with each other and with scientists on Earth. If Chang'e 7 returns with clear confirmation of substantial water ice deposits in those ancient craters, it would rank among the most important discoveries in the history of space exploration. Not only scientifically thrilling, but practically transformative, because it would demonstrate that much of what humanity needs to begin living and working beyond Earth is already there, waiting. Finding a resource and actually using it are 2 very different challenges. You cannot simply scoop up ice and declare a base established. You need technology that can survive with no oxygen, extreme temperature swings, constant radiation, and fine abrasive dust that works its way into every gap in every machine. You need systems that can operate for months or years without human intervention. Essentially, you need to learn how to build on the moon using the moon itself. That is the central goal of Chang'e 8, planned for around 2029. This mission focuses on what engineers call in-situ resource utilization, using what is already present rather than shipping everything from Earth across hundreds of thousands of kilometers of empty space. One set of experiments will attempt to heat and compress lunar soil into solid building blocks. Think of it as baking bricks, except instead of clay from a riverbank, you are using the gray dust that blankets the lunar surface. Those bricks could form landing pads that reduce the dangerous dust clouds kicked up during rocket landings, build protective walls around habitats to shield against radiation, or pave routes for rovers. Other experiments will explore extracting oxygen directly from lunar minerals. The moon's soil is rich in oxygen, but it is chemically locked inside rocks rather than floating freely. The right process can break those bonds and release it. Some designs under consideration involve robotic 3D printers that use lunar soil as raw material to construct structures layer by layer. The same principle as a home 3D printer, but on a far larger and more serious scale. Autonomous machines could print walls, floors, and protective domes long before any human crew arrives. If these technologies prove themselves in the actual lunar environment, rather than just a laboratory, the entire economics of space construction shifts. The moon would effectively help build itself. Everything described so far feeds into one final objective: a permanent research station at the lunar South Pole. China calls it the International Lunar Research Station, or ILRS, and it ranks among the most ambitious space infrastructure projects any nation has seriously proposed. Construction is set to begin in the early 2036. Robotic missions will arrive first, delivering power units, communication systems, and laboratory modules. Machines will handle the difficult, dangerous early construction work long before any astronaut boards a rocket. Over several years, the station is intended to grow module by module until it can support human crews for extended stays. China has also invited other nations to participate, and the response has been notable, with numerous countries expressing interest in contributing experiments, technology, or personnel. This would not be a single nation's outpost, but a shared facility on another world. On the crewed side, China has been methodically testing the systems needed to land astronauts on the lunar surface before the end of this decade. The Long March 10 rocket, capable of lifting roughly 27,000 kilograms into lunar orbit, completed a key low-altitude test flight in early 2026. The Mengzhou crewed spacecraft passed a critical emergency abort test around the same time, demonstrating it can protect astronauts even if something goes wrong during launch. Each crewed lunar mission will require 2 rockets, one carrying the crew, the other carrying the lander. They rendezvous in lunar orbit, dock, and then 2 astronauts descend to the surface. The first visits will likely last only a few days, serving as proof of concept rather than the final destination. Once humanity confirms it can place people on the moon safely and return them home, the path opens toward progressively longer stays. The moon's low gravity makes launches cheaper, its potential for fuel production makes it a strategic launch pad, its far side offers radio silence ideal for astronomy, and its position makes it a natural first stop for missions heading deeper into space. The first group to build lasting infrastructure there will not simply win a competition, they may set the terms for how future missions beyond Earth are planned and executed for decades. And right now, mission by mission, rover by rover, China is laying that foundation on a surface that once seemed like a closed chapter in human history. The moon was never a finished story. It turns out it was only the introduction.